back into where we left off. You wanted to talk about learning to listen.
Yeah, it was perhaps, I didn't realize it at the time, of course. None of this did I realize at the time. My father had, I don't know how or why, but he had become himself a remarkable musician. He understood all kinds of serious music, what we so-call classical music. He understood instrumental music. He understood vocal music. He understood opera, orchestral music of all kinds. He was an avid learner and absorber and collector of music experience. Records were new, the old 78s, and it was part of our, I think I've described before, the big radio, which is also a phonograph and so forth, made by RCA Victor, I remember that. He became one of the most avid collectors of musical scores, for orchestra scores, choral scores, was going to concerts all the time. He was blessed, even though it was the Depression, and he had no real income except what little bit he could get from teaching and maybe directing a choir or whatever in one place or another. Income was not a... we were poor. The fact that he was taking courses and working on 2 degrees in succession at Columbia University gave him access to the tickets that New York Philharmonic, opera, various other music performing organizations, NBC Orchestra and so forth, would make available to students, music students, through the schools. Still goes on. But in those days, they were still building audiences. They didn't automatically have sellout audiences when people like Rachmaninoff or something would come and visit and be a performer. Mm-hmm. So he had access to free or practically free tickets often. Mm-hmm. And he used them. He took advantage of every opportunity to go hear anything new in the way of experience, performance experience that he could possibly hear. And he often would have 2 or 3 tickets. So he would take, my mother almost never went, although she was a bit of a musician herself. Not bad musician at all. But he would invariably take me or my brother or both of us. I remember even one concert, to tell you about how far out into the serious classical idiom he would go. I remember one concert, there was an instrument known as the viola da gamba. You know how a violin and a viola and a cello have all 4 strings, right? Mm-hmm. And you play the strings and that's it. Mm-hmm. The box resonates it and makes the sound when you bow the string. A viola da gamba has, I think, 4 strings, possibly 5, but it also has a set of strings underneath it that resonate in frequency with the strings above. Yeah. It is a softer kind of a sound and a unique sound, and there was a time in music history when specific music was written for that instrument. And I remember that he was so excited, and he took my brother and me, or at least I remember going, to hear a viola da gamba recital. And he was so excited because it's so rare that anything like that was performed. Hmm. And I remember him coming out of the concert, and as always, he was always excited about what he had just heard. And he processed it in his mind as a listener. And as a creative musician himself, he would process it in his mind and share it. He was a tyrant as a father, but he was an inveterate sharer of all his musical knowledge, because he knew that my brother and I had some little gift that, needed a little cultivation, and so he was willing to share it. Mm-hmm. I remember going to NBC concerts, NBC symphony concerts, in what they called then in the NBC area Studio 8H, which is nothing more than a great big room with a stage on it and an orchestra plays on it. And it was one of the deadest rooms. It was the theory in those days that best radio is dead room radio. No live concert hall kind of a sound at all. And I remember going to concerts, NBC concert, and once it was either Paderewski or Rachmaninoff. That was the soloist, and these days I can't remember which one. But you know, great name that anybody eat their lunch, eat their heart out to be able to go and hear if you had a chance. And it was just one of those things that we just did routinely, kind of a thing. There was an orchestra in the city called the New York City Orchestra, I think it was, that we often went to concerts of. We were going to concerts as much as it was humanly possible to go to concerts. And for a nickel you could get on a subway if you had a nickel. Otherwise we walked to concerts. From Midtown 55th Street you can walk reasonably almost anywhere. The thing that made this valuable, I'm sure Leon would say the same thing, my brother. The thing that made this valuable to me, and then ultimately to Pete and to Martha, who also learned a lot about listening at my father's house when they were grandchildren. Learning to listen to music, learning is really to know what music can really be, what it can be at its best, what goes beyond just the notes. It's what makes a difference between somebody who knows how to read a play, read the words in a play out loud, and somebody who knows how to act that play, and to be able to make the role all of a sudden come alive, so alive you believe that you're there to a real life experience. And it was that kind of listening that he knew how to do. That, I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea at the time. It was many years later that I began to wake up to how important this was for a person who has ultimately become a practicing daily musician. That taught me how to be creative because I knew how to listen. Even when I'm asking others to perform, I already have heard it through the ears that he taught me to have. My brother would say the same thing, exactly the same thing, and it started with him. Pete has made a comment a number of times about he would go down out the back door of our house and down the alley into the back door of his grandfather's house, and he would find his grandfather listening to some music. He was a huge record collector, big sound system, wonderful sound system, and for the day. And even Pete has learned at his grandfather's feet how to listen, what to listen for, how to really hear what's inside the music, what it says. And Martha the same thing. Martha the same thing. He was a great teacher in that regard. And so here's this man, me, talking about a man, my father, who on the one hand was literally a tyrant and could be hell to live with, on the one hand. On the other hand, here's the man who had the creative mind and the creative heart and the creative insights to be able to pass on to his two sons something of what makes the creative thing that both his sons now do, as did he, make it possible to continue on with some of it. In a way, that's kind of a rare gift. It's sort of like, I suppose, a surgeon or a physician having a son and his son learns at his father's feet, kind of a thing, or daughter for that matter. Learning at his father's feet. That can be a very special gift. We don't all get that chance. For me, I also, because he was such a damn tyrant, wanted to reject an awful lot of it. So that's another part of the story that's going to come on as we go through a lot of this. It's going to come into play. Why the heck wasn't I a musician right from the very get-go and never stop and go all the way straight through like I should have? That's because the fact that he was a tyrant drove me so crazy. I didn't want to have anything to do in that way of living with be like him. No way. So I threw an awful lot of opportunity away that I could have made for myself at an earlier time that I had to make up. And you never do make up for lost time.
Yeah.
You never do. It's impossible to make up for lost time. That business of learning to listen, what to listen for, I can take you to a choir rehearsal on Wednesday night anytime. And after the rehearsal, we can go out and have a few beers. And I can tell you what I did in that rehearsal that is a result of the fact that got a certain kind of good result. That is a result of the fact that it has its origins and its source in just what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we're talking about and using words to describe this only just touches the surface. It went into a huge amount of depth. It truly did. He was a collector, I think I've mentioned before, of not only records, but of orchestral scores. And I can remember when I was 5, 6, I can remember the first recording that I really got excited about. First piece of music, a recording of a piece by Rachmaninoff called Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, piano and orchestra. And I was listening to it with much enjoyment. And he goes to a shelf and he picks up, there is such thing as being able to go to stores and buying miniature scores instead of the conductor's score like with a big book. It's just a little print. You got to have good eyes. And I remember him passing me the score for this and then pointing out to me where all this music is that I'm hearing. Do you hear this? Do you see it here? There it is. Do you see this here? Hear this? And it was an amazing experience because of all the composers he could have given me that I was passionate about. Rachmaninoff is one of the most detailed guys in writing a piece of music. He can put more ink in a single measure of music because of his ability to use the variety, all of the variety of instruments that are available at the same time. Amazing. Yeah. Truly, even today, it's still amazing to me. There are plenty of others that do it now too, but he was the first one that I really learned from. And so here I was, 5 or 6, and I was already reading conductors' orchestral scores. Now, why the heck wasn't I able to take something out of what I learned there and build on that earlier in my life, instead of having just before I was 50 years old, going back to school and being able to spend the rest of my life doing that?
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah.
It relates to the tyrant side, and I don't know that I have all the answers to that.
Absolutely.
You better become a psychologist so you can ask the right question.